The Human Founder Podcast by Gali Bloch-Liran.
Guy, let's take a few breaths before we dive into the podcast. Let's inhale for 4, hold it for 4, and exhale for 4
We're
3
doing
times. Let's do it.
All the making of a viral podcast right there. This is downhill from here.
No, it's getting uphill because sometimes we just need to stop and take a breath, right?
That's absolutely right.
Okay, so now I can begin. Hi, I'm Gali Bloch-Liran, and welcome to The Human Founder, the podcast where we speak about the mental aspects of the entrepreneurial journey. Entrepreneurs often describe the emotional roller coaster that is embedded in being an entrepreneur or investor, where you experience the lowest of lows, such as when you find out that one of your closest friends was diagnosed with ALS disease, and the highest of highs when you become a father for the first, the second, and the third time. And it's from that place of uncertainty, the need to constantly self-manage ourselves, keep up our energy, and be mentally resilient in order to deal with everything. Well, it's not easy. In each episode, I will be talking to entrepreneurs, investors, psychologists, being their sounding board, with the goal of creating a space for this less spoken about layer, which is the mental aspect accompanying the entrepreneurial journey. I will also share tips and tricks to help boost your focus, clarity, and mental resilience. So today, I really have the pleasure of talking with you, Guy, Yamen, and thank you for sharing the breath in the beginning with me. So thank you for coming.
Pleasure being here.
And let me introduce you for those who are not familiar with you. Guy, you are a co-founder and managing partner of TPY Capital, an early-stage Israel-based VC. Prior to launching a TPY, you spent a few years as a consultant with McKinsey and Company in both New York and Tel Aviv, and we'll speak about it later on. You're a co-founder of Price for Life, a nonprofit which was dedicated to accelerating the discovery of treatment and cures for ALS. In another nonprofit, Meet, Middle East Entrepreneurs of Tomorrow, bringing together Israeli and Palestinian youth in learning computer science and entrepreneurship. You helped spread the foundation of Meet's virtual learning hub just prior to COVID, when COVID hit. You're a fellow of the Middle East Leadership Initiative of the Aspen Institute and a member of the Aspen Global Leadership Network. Received your MBA from Harvard Business School and BA in Economics and LLB from Tel Aviv University. So many things that you've done along the way. And we're going to dive deep a little bit to some of them today. But I want to start with what you told me in the elevator. You have 3 daughters, right?
That's correct.
And you're willing to have many more, right?
Well, in a bizarre world, I think yes. We have 3 girls, 7, 5, and 2, and they're actually a little bit like babushka dolls. They
You
also
open
look
one,
alike.
there's another one and another one.
Exactly. So surprisingly, since we last met, which is about a year ago, we did not reproduce. But in a bizarre world, I could imagine having more babushkas. I don't see it actually practically happening, but that's right.
But that's the ideal thing that might have happened, if things would be a bit different.
Yeah. Well, I'm a late bloomer, so I did start late, and I did not think we're gonna have more than 2 kids. Funny that we're diving into this aspect of life, but ultimately
For a
probably
reason.
the most important aspect of life. So I'm gonna roll with the punches. Initially, I did not think we're gonna have more than 2 offsprings. But once we started this off, we realized how much we actually enjoyed with all the craziness of life. And our youngest just turned 2, and
Terrible too? The horrible too? Or not? Not there yet.
terrible, absolutely horrible too. And at the same time, there's something that is absolutely captivating about it.
Mhm.
And my wife and I, we constantly live nostalgia, which I don't know if you've kind of experienced this mindset where that in the presence you already long to the present.
Yeah.
And in a position like this, we don't have a baby at home anymore. Or in a soon, we're not going to have a toddler at home. So that's something that is accompanying it. And it's nice to actually recognize in the sleepless nights, recently, many sleepless nights, as well as
You look fresh.
look very fresh.
You
As
worked hard to look fresh.
exactly, as well as the daily tantrums. Like
Mhm.
there's something nice about recognizing in real time that this too will pass.
I want to reflect on two things that you said because you're a father to three girls and I'm a mother to three boys. So it's exactly the opposite.
That we're offline, we're just
Neg-
gonna arrange what we call the shiro.
It's like I just had Danny from Viola and Johnny from F2, and Johnny has four boys, and Danny have four girls, and they just mentioned both how they always laughed about it. That they're the same ages, different gender. But first of all, how does it feel to be a father to three girls? And second, the fact that you are a young father, respectively, and you see yourself as an investor, the sleepless nights, what does it mean to have 2 years old at home? I think can also allow you, put you in a space to be very empathetic and to understand what's going on in the hearts and the minds of the young entrepreneurs that you invest in them, which are dealing with the same thing at home and needs to balance, their fatherhood and the fact that they are founders.
Yeah, I think you can be an absolutely fantastic investor without being a parent.
That as well.
And with that, I will say I don't think many things had prepared me for becoming an investor more than being a father. And I don't think I would have been as decent of a father as I am had I not been an investor before. So these two are actually kind of interlinked
Mhm.
because I've worked with many startups before becoming a father.
Mhm.
And there's something about the recognition, which I did not have as an investor in my early days as an investor, of what you can and cannot actually change in the trajectory of a startup.
Mhm. Mhm.
That is very meaningful for your journey as a parent.
Mhm.
The recognition that there's just so little that you can actually affect,
Mhm.
and you should focus on those things that actually matter. It actually transcends whether you look at it from an investor lens or from a father lens. When you invest in startups and when you're an active investor, the temptation to kind of breach beyond what would actually drive the needle is high.
Mhm.
And I think one of the recognition for me as an investor is really to figure out what those areas that really drive the needle, and the same goes
Mhm.
for
As
being a father.
father, exactly.
Yeah, and to your question about entrepreneurs, I just have tremendous respect as someone who considers myself being entrepreneur, being one of the founders of TPY, the fund that we started more than a decade ago. Just tremendous respect to anyone like yourself who manages to do this on kind of an independent pathway of entrepreneurship and also do this tremendously tough thing of being a parent for kids. So if I needed an extra layer of empathy, I think I got it in the present of being a father.
And I totally agree with it. And I think that the beauty and also challenge from time to time is how you combine between the two because life is not separate. You're not either a parent or an investor or founder, depends. You have to make them align. You have to make them. You have to combine them in the course of life, and to see how you balance it in the right way. Sometimes it will be more to this side. Sometimes it will be more to this side. But overall, you need to see how you combine the two things in order to create a whole self, both as a parent and as a founder or an investor.
Well, especially in a household where both
Exactly.
parents, like
Hmm.
ours, both parents are
Hmm.
actually career
Hmm.
people,
Hmm.
and that makes it extra tough.
Hmm.
Um, and it's interesting because you are talking about mixing it, and at least from I don't think I have philosophy about many things in life, but
Uh-huh.
one of the things that I was never able to, it's actually not a question of option. I was never able to disconnect between the professional and the, call it, emotional aspect of things. And honestly not 100% sure that this is the making of a fantastic investor, but that's
Hmm.
just the reality of it. With maturity, thank you for complimenting me for being a very young dad. But in years, or dog years, at least in dog years, I'm not extremely young. And at the same time, with it comes the recognition of the stuff that you cannot affect in
Hmm.
terms of your personality.
Hmm.
And one of the things is I'm a pretty kind of total guy, in the sense that I'm really immerse myself into the stuff that I do. And this is something I used to fight, and I no longer
Mhm.
fight that. So when I invest in entrepreneurs, it's really based a lot on what I would call the emotional affinity.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
historically, maybe I used to try and dodge that
Mhm.
and dismiss this as something being less than analytical, but no
No
longer
longer.
is that the case.
It's so beautiful, and I'm so happy to hear you saying it because I think this is one of the key messages that are so important for founders and entrepreneurs also to hear it from investors, to remember that they have flesh and blood just like themselves, and the way that the founder needs to deal with the fact that his spouse, for example, is also, have has her own career path, and they are both in charge of raising the children. So the investor on the other side, he's dealing with many similarities, and he needs to balance it as well. He or she, depends in the gender, with his or her spouse, and they both need to support each other. And sometimes they used to be, founders used to even be afraid or feel that the investors are not approachable, etc. And I think that bringing this attitude, that we're also flesh and blood, we're also dealing with this stuff, makes you as investors much more human. This is one point. And the other, it was very beautiful the way that you described it. At the beginning, you were resisting it. No, let's separate, let's manage this, let's manage that. And part of the beautiful streams in psychology called ACT, which is an acronym of acceptance and commitment therapy, which actually speaks about how we learn to accept what happens, to commit to it, and to work with it. And that's exactly how you described it. That nowadays, this is life. I have this and I have that. And I want to make sure that I'm navigating in the right, in the best possible way in order to make them both grow and evolve. And I think that this is something very mature that we embrace with life, less fighting with what lies in here and more accepting and learning how to work with it.
Well, and I think you're absolutely hitting the nail on the head on that, in the sense that I think that the days of entrepreneur, an executive, a leader, where you've got this some sort of an external facade
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
that is different from what's
Mm-hmm.
happening at home, what's
Mm-hmm.
happening after hours, so to speak, are gone. And I
Mm-hmm.
think the only area where you maybe see that facade still persistent is in politics.
Mm-hmm.
And even that, I think, is kind of fading away. One of my friends who's on the board of experts of the fund is a lady by the name of Belinda Wong,
Mm-hmm.
who is the CEO of Starbucks in China. And she took me on just pre-COVID on a visit to the roastery of Starbucks in Shanghai, which is a
Mm-hmm.
huge coffee roastery,
Mm-hmm.
kind of the flagship of Starbucks in China. And what was really remarkable to me, if she knew I was speaking about her, she's so modest, she would be freaking out.
She can listen later on.
Well,
Yeah,
yes,
you can
she
send it to
could.
her. You
Maybe
won't
I will.
listen, but you can send it to her.
Absolutely. And just what was really, really nice to me, because, I think Chinese culture is very different and maybe more hierarchical, definitely than the Israeli culture. Just walking the ground,
Mhm,
there was absolutely zero facade.
mhm,
And it was very clear that people recognized that the CEO of Starbucks is walking around amidst the, um, the, uh, the, the folk, but at the same time, no one was changing their attitude at
mhm,
all.
mhm,
And this is, I think, the kind of leadership I would, aspire for, or would hope for our entrepreneurs to adopt, where you walk the ground. If you've got 100 people, 200, 500 people around you, and no one gets phased and no one changes their behavior, they recognize that you're there, but there's nothing that changes. Like in the old movies where the boss walks around and everybody's all of a sudden with a facade of importance of
mhm.
or exaggerated activity. Uh, these days are gone.
That's beautiful. And I think that as an investor, you have a lot of tools and way to impact the leadership style of the founders that you're actually investing in by giving them, not just by saying, by, action speaks louder than words, and by just by behaving that way, like being a role model to how you see leadership, can really allows them to behave in the same manner and to later on grow huge companies and good companies that the employees feel convenient, feel comfortable, feel open, feel psychologically safety in order to behave, as they are, and not to change their perception or behaviors because, the CEO or the founder is walking by. I want to take you back a little bit to your childhood.
Of course you do.
Of course, I do. That's why you came here, right? I told you before, but you can say only what you want to. Being a family of immigrants, your first language was actually
Arabic,
Arabic.
actually. Yeah,
So
yeah.
take us there a little bit.
So my again, nothing. If you look at the path of history, there's nothing extraordinary about my family story. But my family are Baghdadi Jews. Both my dad and my mom were in the same Jewish school in Baghdad, and ended up fleeing that country in 1971, which was actually pretty late for a Jew in Baghdad to stay there, and did emigrated to Israel. And I was born a few years after as firstborn. The first language that I heard and is still absolutely natural to me, even though I hear it less and less, unfortunately, in the path of years, is the Jewish Baghdadi Arabic dialect. So and you spoke about resilience, and I think it came in your it came through in your kind of initial words,
Mhm.
and that's a word I really respect. And I think a lot of my respect for that word actually comes from seeing how my parents coming here really without anything, and how they have led their lives, and how they raised my brother and I. There was absolutely zero kind of maybe feeling of how life could have been different, or wishing for some sort of a parallel universe. They lived very clearly in the moment, and there was never the sense of we were handed pretty heavy hand in life, and as a kid you don't actually think about this. You don't actually think how courageous your parents are, but just managing to chug through. But I think from then on, I really do have a ton of respect. I used that word already, but a ton of respect for entrepreneurs who are kind of the underdogs, those that really had to go through something or grapple through something and pass a certain hurdle in order to actually do this, and willing to take the risk. Because I think sometimes being a child of an immigrant, you're actually more less maybe you're more reluctant to take on risks because of that. When you see folks that are actually taking the risk, it's really because they have got massive conviction about what they're going to do in the startup.
And I think it also relates to how they feel about themselves, the inner self. Something is very strong there because as an immigrant, and when things are not stable and you don't know how the new future will look like, so you really learn to rely on your inner strength and abilities and capabilities and what you can do and how you can make an impact and how you can change. And all of these are core, building blocks to our personality, to our DNA, and are very valuable in the entrepreneurial journey. How we build, how we rely on ourselves, and I like the word resourcefulness. That doesn't matter what comes by, what do we need to deal with. We know that the answers are within us by using our skills, abilities, capacities, everything that we've been through till today, everything we've gone through, everything that we know that even if we don't have the answer, we know that we trust on ourselves and on our skills to find the right way in order to know what to do.
Well, what you're saying is important, and it's super tricky, right? Because if I think about how we measure or try to evaluate entrepreneurs, whether it's before an investment or after we've made an investment in
Mhm.
TPY, the reality is that it's a very, very fine line between having massive conviction,
Mhm.
self confidence,
Mhm.
those pillars that you spoke about,
Mhm.
of being resilient and being actually a tad delusional.
Mhm.
And what you want from an entrepreneur, at least what we look for, is someone who can actually straddle the line. On the one hand, have that kind of conviction and that kind of contagious belief in what they're going to do. At the same time, look at reality in the eyes
Mhm.
and actually recognize when something had changed, whether they need to pivot from the initial idea, whether they need to change something, and it's really a fine line.
Mhm.
More often than not, what you'd see are entrepreneurs who are, in a way, super
Charismatic
charismatic,
and very
absolutely,
convincing, and sometimes
and
it's
it sounds
difficult to pinpoint what
that
exactly lies
that's
underneath.
exactly right. And sometimes you get caught up. And I
Mhm.
think this,
Mhm.
if we look at where we've been in the market in the last couple of years,
Mhm. Mhm.
this is an era where many entrepreneurs knew nothing else but to rally the troops, for something that was called growth at all costs,
Mm-hmm.
and say we're going to take on the world. And it's a little bit of a different universe now, not just a little bit, but more than a little bit universe now, where you actually need as an entrepreneur to go back to the boring,
Mm-hmm.
messy, extremely
Mm-hmm.
complex task of, for example, figuring out unit economics and how you get to a judicial kind of growth. And not all the entrepreneurs that went out in the last few years possess this kind of muscle.
Mm-hmm. And on top of it, it relies to it. Just had another conversation with another investor a couple of days ago.
I don't want to hear about this.
Yeah, so I think you will agree, and then we can say it's
I'm
something
the
that you
only
said.
investor
You're
that you
the only
spoke about.
investor in
Yes.
the universe that in the recent years, entrepreneurs were dealing with a lot of money, and money was very easy to get and to grow their startups, and like the budgets and the burnout was really high, and all of a sudden they need to shrink the activity. They need to learn how to do more with less. And this is the mindset that they are not used to because there was an abundance of many, many things, money, etc. Let's recruit more people. Let's bring this and this and that. And now, how do we get even to better results and we show better growth and higher ARR and other metrics that we want to check, but even with less resources? And this is something that for people who just grew into this reality that we're here in the few recent years, and they are not used to previous uh, uh, crises.
Downturns. Yeah.
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 So now it's really difficult for them to make this shift in their mindset and to really believe that they have it in them to succeed even in different situations.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, and it goes even beyond that, because I think over the course of the last few years, there have been instances where entrepreneurs went on to start a new thing because that, in a way, was the easiest career path,
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
especially in a
mm-hmm.
place like Israel where you
That's a
do have
valid point.
access to tech and you've got access to capital, and it's a relatively sophisticated funding environment.
Mm-hmm,
So whether in the West Coast or London or Tel Aviv,
mm-hmm,
to go out and become entrepreneur in a way was the easiest
mm-hmm,
kind of the
mm-hmm,
easiest thing that you could have done. And I'll tell you a story. There's a guy I love. We talked about this like on the friendly basis, because it's, for me, it's always part of the story. But on a friendly basis, it was very close to the fund, and he went out to fundraise 2 years ago. The natural thing would have been for us to do something together, but speaking of reluctancy, he was reluctant to take on some very basic, call it analytical exercises
mm-hmm,
around trying to figure out what are the underlying assumptions behind what he was going to
mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
do in the startup. And he was absolutely transparent with me, and I loved it, in saying, Guy, I don't actually want to do that, and I don't need to do this. I don't need to do this because I'm going to be able to raise. And lo and behold, he did. But I also don't want to do this. And I think what he was telling me effectively is, I don't want to actually face big questions that if I'm going to start digging into them now, I may not go. This is, when we talked about the line of conviction and dilution, I'm not saying he's delusional, and hopefully he'll succeed, God's willing. But there is a point where you're saying, if you're not willing to face some of the fundamental question of what's underlying your startup,
Mm-hmm.
and really figure out what you're believing in. And this is something that we always advocate when we
Mm-hmm.
invest in
Mm-hmm.
startups and afterwards. Just be clear about what the underlying assumptions.
Mm-hmm.
So if they change, you're at least in a position to understand and react to that. And if your underlying assumption keep gyrating and keep changing, it's actually super difficult in the life of an entrepreneur who has to deal with 100 different fires every single day,
Mm-hmm.
to realize that there's some tectonic shift
Yeah.
or some secular trend shift that you were just unaware of because you're not willing to document mentally or otherwise, and hopefully both, how those underlying assumptions have changed.
I think it's really true. And it even goes a bit deeper because you described it in a very practical way. But we used to see so many people, women and men, turns to entrepreneurship because it's very sexy and there's a lot of money and this is the way out. I don't want to go to a corporate. I want to do this. I want to do something of my own. But the hard truth is that being an entrepreneur, founder, is a very, very, very difficult job. It's a very difficult capacity to maintain, to do whatever it takes. It's a lot of responsibility, the ownership, the commitment, the long hours, the trade-offs that one needs to make. And I think that it comes back to the very, very preliminary in time point of making the choice of being an entrepreneur to go on this path. And I think that many people didn't really manage this conversation, had this conversation with themselves, with their inner self.
Right,
Am I willing to pay the price?
because in a way it was opting out of becoming entrepreneurship in an ecosystem like in Israel. Again,
Right.
not for everyone, but for those who had the inclination, rather than actively opting in and saying, I'm actually going to do this with all the responsibility to my
And everything that
employees
it
and to my
contains. Yeah.
investors and to my lifestyle and to my
Mhm.
family and everything else.
And in a way, I think that what happens today in the markets is actually healthy in this manner because it's like a berativit. It's like the default. It's like it cleans the noise, you know? Only the strong,
Self-selection.
yeah,
Yeah,
self-selection and the strongest will
only
prevail
the
and will
fittest survive.
exactly. And this is something healthy because it's some kind of a correction, you know, to the market, to the entrepreneurs, etc. But for those who choose to go on this journey, I think that really getting to know themselves in the best possible way and just to what you say, to ask the big questions, to understand, you know, the preliminary assumptions that they're going through. It's so important because at the end, when an investor will look at you, or you'll need to sell it to a client, or you'll need to pitch it wherever, if you don't feel comfortable with what you're bringing to the table, with if you don't really believe in this, and of course that always what we say is a little bit better than the truth itself of, you know, the level of the product, etc. And this is okay as long
Right.
as it makes sense. But really have this inner strong belief in what we're doing and why we're doing it and why us in this sector in this time on this solution is something that goes way beyond with the entrepreneur to hold his entrepreneurial journey. And it's very beautiful to see how even though this colleague of you, a friend, that you really wanted to do something with him, but it made him really dive deep into those questions to find answers. And I think it's a really, really valuable tool and for entrepreneurs to really ask themselves those questions before
Right. And
beginning.
even though I will say, Gali, I think in a way it is what's happened in the last year is almost unfair, and in some respects it is unfair for entrepreneurs
Hmm.
because, truth be told, in many, many, many companies, many startups, what they heard from investors was very clear, and it
Hmm.
was growth at all costs. And
Hmm.
another example of another buddy of mine who's not out of the Israeli ecosystem, a company that had raised more than $1 billion, in fact, more than $1.5 billion, and he was out in a key position to grow the company. And literally from one day to another in March of 2022, it was all the way from growth at all cost and an expense in many dozens of millions of dollars a month to, well, we've got to actually figure out what the profitability of this company is. This is what he's hearing from investors. And any kind of growth activity is halted except for organic growth. And he was tasked with doing non organic stuff. And if you think about the entrepreneur, the first time CEO, and not just
Hmm.
that individual, but all the people around them, having heard that, the bells of go, go, go at all costs, and then in an instant, without any recognition or self recognition
Hmm.
of investors, that this is it, we're just moving on, there's something extremely disorienting about it.
And it's very difficult mentally and psychologically to this entrepreneur to hold this, you know, to deal with it. How do I address it now? What do I need to do? How do I make all these adjustments within me, which is exactly the agility that we need to have as founders, but yet when it I confront it, you know, and I have, I don't know, 30, 40 people in my company, and all of a sudden I need to make harsh decisions and I need to, from one day to tomorrow to another day, really to change the whole perception that I have about what's going on. So going back to what you said at the beginning, the professional and the personal and the emotional, we cannot separate it. And the founder that stands there, or the team of the founders, they are dealing with a lot of, scarcity and uncertainty and even anxieties to how do I hold it all together.
Yep, you're right, and I think if there's something that people undermine, and it's true for how we investors, interact with entrepreneurs, and it's true for how entrepreneurs interact with us and with their employees, is how important it is to just show up. And what I mean by just showing up, it's really just being consistent
Mm-hmm.
about what you're saying.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't mean you're not going to change your
Of course.
views to my earlier point about underlying assumptions. But what I really strive to do consistently in my professional career, and also, as I said, in my personal life, is just be consistent. There's something terribly disorienting for me when someone says something and then says something which is based on completely different underlying
Mm-hmm.
assumptions without recognizing
Mm-hmm.
that
The
shift,
gap, yeah.
because it indicates to me that either analytically they're just not capable of following through, and that's rarely the case because we have the privilege of working with extremely smart people typically, or that they just don't recognize, or even worse, they kind of game it. And when you look on the other side, and again, it's been very prevalent in venture in the last couple of years, and since the downturn, when investors are telling the entrepreneur something and then it abruptly changes,
Mm-hmm.
I feel the pain of how difficult it is. So trying to remain consistent in how you see a growth of a startup is extremely important in my mind.
Yeah, and I want to add on it. Consistency can, at the base of consistency is actually, our core, our values. If I look at this as I'm being consistent with myself, okay, and comparing myself to myself, that throughout my life, caring for others or being warmly or helping others or the different building blocks that I feel that are part of my consistency, okay, goes with me in the different chapters in the different part of the journey. So even if the external surrounding is changing and now there's a turn down and less money and we need to fire people, I'm consistent internally, my inner environment, the way that I see the world, the way that I behave according to my values, that stays with me. And this is something that really helps if we turn the focus internally and less externally. So I'm consistent with myself. This is something, it's a tool that can really help both founders and investors to know that every time that they are facing a decision, a challenge that they need to make, they ask themselves, what is the best thing that I can do at this moment according to my values, according to the values? I know that I'm doing the best that I can. And this is consistency, because all the time they ask themselves this question and it helps them to be the best version that they can at this specific point in time.
And when I hear you say this, I think two words come to my mind at least. One is why, and the other one is ego. Why? Because this is one of the questions that we consistently ask
Mm-hmm.
entrepreneurs, especially repeat entrepreneurs.
Mm-hmm.
We're lucky to be working with quite a few of those that have gone at it for the second, third, sometimes even fourth time.
Mm-hmm.
So when you've done well, and many of them have, and you go at it again, you go to ask yourself and them why, and really try to get to the motivation. And we always say there's no right answer,
Mm-hmm.
but let's just figure out what's going to be a fantastic outcome. Is it really changing the universe? Because rarely it is changing the universe. Or is it something that has to do with other aspects, by the way, including ego? Guess what? No one will ever say that it's ego that's driving him or
Mm-hmm.
her into entrepreneurship, but that's a very strong aspect, and it's a very strong aspect of any of
Mm-hmm.
us,
It's important
uh,
also as long as it's manageable and contained in the right manner.
and recognizable.
Mm-hmm.
And I
Mm-hmm.
think if I look at even within our small partnership at TPY, and my partnership with my beloved partner Dekel, like so much of our journey um, has to do with recognizing each other's egos and recognizing where that is something that drives the decision versus anything else. It really is. I know it's like, if there's one thing I would say to you know the 20-year-old self
Mm-hmm.
of me is
Mm-hmm.
is really trying to circle
Mm-hmm.
ego related decisions, and at least recognize them. Ego can't go away, ego should not go away, but realizing if there's something that is fundamentally driven by that, by sense of self-perception, by a sense of grandiose, what have you, by a sense of fear of failure, you
Mm-hmm.
can you can, you can pick whatever ego aspect you're looking at, and try and at least put that in some sort of
Mm-hmm.
compartment rather than having
Ignore
that
it.
be the driver. Yeah.
It's beautiful, and I'll say a few things. First of all, to continue the ego conversation, ego is important and it's part of our personality, and we don't want to let it go because it also keeps us from other things and it helps us. But acknowledging it, just as you said, and put some kind of mental note. Okay, here I see that the ego is managing me. There's an opportunity to learn here something, to work in this area. Let's see what I can find out from this. Instead of saying, oh, you're bad, goodbye, go away, let's see what you're trying to show me about myself in this point in time. And the second thing I want to say is you are co-founders yourself, Declan and yourself, your partners in an investment firm. Doesn't matter that you are in investors and not co-founders of startup, which has a lot of similarities. And what I want to say to the founders that are listening to us, that also partners in a VC, small, big, doesn't matter, they need to maintain those relationships as well. In the same way that you have challenges and conflicts with your co-founders in startups, not you, but other investors, everyone has those challenges and conflicts within the VC itself. And I remember that a couple of years ago,
You had a little British.
yeah, it came
remember?
out. It came out British. I'm
Remember.
British. I remember. I always when I okay, another point. I used to be a flight attendant, so I consume also the American English and the British English, and sometimes it's mixed. And I really like British English, so I'm happy when you see it. Okay, going back. So I remember I had this. It was American one, an offsite with a VC and its partners. And after the offside, they told me, you know, Gali, this is the first time that we allowed ourselves to speak up about those things personally and one to each other and to really share those things. And it's like we always talk about work and just work and investments, but we didn't allow this conversation to come, to be here, to be present. And it's so important because if we try, you know, to move things away, they definitely don't disappear. They just grow, and you know, the thoughts and the feelings that we have around it. And if we allow the things to be between us, it's present. Let's talk about it. Let's see what we need to change. When my ego managing me, when the ego is managing you, we learn each other. We can reflect to each other what happens during the conversation. So this is a very, very strong space to be in. And I think that the more investors, because usually, I'm not talking about angels, but usually it's a team of investors, two and more. It can be many more. As long as we will manage this kind of dialogue and communication between us, we will be much better investors between us, and we will be much better investors to our founders because we can better relate to what's going on with their partnerships.
You know, it's interesting because I always considered myself to be a good listener, but truth of the matter is there's one thing I like more than to listen, and that's to speak. And
You really
because
listen to me now.
I just
I
did.
saw
No,
it. I felt it.
you know the joke about Israel is that, you know,
Uh-huh.
1% of the time you speak and 1% of the time you listen, and 98% of the time you pounce in the darkness, waiting
To speak, to say
to
something,
say
to
something.
interrupt.
So a year and a half ago, I had a little minor vocal cord surgery, and I could actually not speak
Uh-huh.
for a few days.
What a gift.
What and you know what, you're saying it kind of jokingly.
No, I was
Well,
serious.
first of all, it was a gift to the universe around me. Let me assure you. But beyond that, the fact that I could actually not speak. You think that you're a good listener until you cannot utter a word.
Mhm.
And there was something about those few days that I was not allowed to speak, that you get to a point where your level of awareness
Yeah.
and observation
Mhm.
is just a different at a different level. So I do try since to just give myself this kind of, you know, whether it's in a board meeting or any kind of work related meeting, or, you know, startups presenting, also remember that, you know, I could have had some vocal cord injury at the time, and maybe should speak a little bit less.
And another thing about that, so you know, things, bad things or complicated things or challenges occur all time in life, to investors, to founders, to whomever, to everyone. This is part of life. And learning how to see what happened and what we can take from it is a lot of internal, emotional, mental work that we can do and really, you know, help us grow. So even this surgery that you said, that I'm sure wasn't a fun thing to do, even scary and a lot of uncertainty.
Not as scary as podcast. Let me tell you.
But do you feel scared now, or
No,
you're
no, no,
okay?
no,
I
no.
feel like you're
No, no.
natural.
Yeah, absolutely.
You're moving in this
Just give me the
seat.
mic.
Yeah, just give me the mic. And I have to say to those who listen, and it's a lot of you, Guy called me yesterday, Gali, we'll talk about this. And I told him, Guy, it will be okay. Chill off. I know what to do. You're gonna have fun. And
Of course.
so it's beautiful to
Uh,
see it. Also, the transition that we have, because I'll leverage it. It was a peak performance for you, right? I'm putting the mic and putting the camera. You need to see what's going on, and it's exactly like for founders. They are on the stage or in a pitch.
Yeah,
So all those moments in life, it's not our comfort zone to be in, but the question is how we address them,
right.
what we take from it, how do we mentally prepare ourselves
So
to
are we
this.
doing this next week again? Is that what you're
You're
saying?
already being an expert.
I'm in.
No, I mean, we can do a whole series because I like talking to you. So anyway, I don't remember what I've said, but I want to take the conversation to continue
Sure.
it. So we spoke about you and Perez, Deckel, sorry, and we spoke about what changes now in the investment world. So what changed in your investment process, or how the situation now in the markets affects the way that you choose investments in founders, the questions that you ask, the level of materials that you want to do,
Right.
you want to see how it changed.
No, it's an interesting one. I don't think fundamentally our questioning had changed, because I think even at the top of the cycle, as it's called, back in 2020, back in 2021, I don't think our DNA as a fund was to kind of get drunk by the bar, and we say today, we're not with a hangover right now.
Mhm.
I think there's something about maybe the way we operate, as or maybe the DNA of the fund is such that I don't think we were ever drawn to the circus promoter kind of
Mhm. Mhm.
entrepreneur, which we spoke about, and like the typecast that we spoke about, and I don't think they were drawn to us. So what we really do try to understand, and that's been consistent in the top of the cycle and at the bottom of the cycle.
Speaking about consistency, this is exactly
eh,
that,
eh,
what
eh,
we spoke about
eh,
earlier.
right, it is really the a kind of the proximity to the pain of the entrepreneur. Why are they choosing to do what they're doing? Is it because it's something that they've experienced? Is it because of something that they've explored? And beyond the thesis or the theory behind why they're doing what they're doing, have they really done the research? And you know what, Gali? The research is not about the glorified TAM kind of joke that, showing me that you've got a $10 billion
Yeah.
market, which is ripe for disruption, when you just launched and you're three people strong. It's a stretch. I want to see how you actually did your analysis in
Mhm.
terms of speaking to the right people. Do you even recognize who the right people in that
Which is actually
industry?
how they think, their process of
Exactly.
thinking.
Uh,
How
the,
do
the,
they address?
how do they address? How do they explore? How do they navigate the various different signals that you get when you go out and do something? And people will tell you, nah, no one's going to need that. No one's going to pay for this. Like, there's just no way you can take on a company of the scale of snowflakes and so on.
So how do they deal with those responses?
That's exactly right. And the question that lingers, especially at this point of time of the market, it always was, but always at this point of a time when you do investments, sometimes, first money in, as we do, is really you put that individual and you kind of try to imagine them in front of talent that they need to bring to the startup, in front of the strategic partners that they're going to work with, in front of clients, and in front of the next round funds that they're going to be looking at, and you ask yourself, can they pull it off? Can they share a narrative which is compelling on the one hand and is really grounded? So the point of being grounded at this point of time has become ever more prevalent than it did just a mere year ago. It sounds like a different life, but
Mhm.
being able to show that kind of level of groundness is particularly important.
Thank you for that. I want to change
Thank you for
to
thanking.
I want to
Become
change to
formal all of a
wait,
sudden.
now I'm going to be heavy. The humor is later to take us out from the heaviness. So you mentioned in the beginning when I asked you about the one of the lowest of lows of moments in your life, you mentioned it when you found out that one of your closest friends was diagnosed with ALS. So my question to you is, how do you feel that this this thing that happened within your course of life shaped you, shaped the way that you think, shaped the way that you behave, shaped your persona as an investor, shaped maybe your persona as a father. What was the impact that it made on you?
Well, this is a close a friend of mine who was also my roommate when I went to Harvard for the business school. An Israeli guy by the name of Avi Kramer. Here, I'm complimenting him again, and he was diagnosed when we were first year students at Harvard. And I just there's really no one as inspirational as the guy is also a clown, but as inspirational as this guy is, who's father of a beautiful 6-year-old girl now. And this happened, more than 15 years ago that he was diagnosed. So this is going well beyond any kind of statistics of what's the life duration or
Mhm.
longevity of an ALS patient. ALS is Lou Gehrig's disease, as the Americans call it. It's a neurodegenerative disease. The mind is not impacted, but every single muscle of your body pretty much stops from being operational, all the way from your voice to your motion. And I have never seen, and I don't think in my life I will ever see someone who had faced such kind of adversity and be able from day one to just pick himself up and actually do things about it. And the one thing I'm trying to take out of this is the importance of action, Gali, if you will. There's something really compelling, and I say it to maybe some of our Israeli brethren in this time of where we are in the political cycle, and we spoke about the election earlier on,
If
where
you don't
this
want to have more girls.
well, there's something very compelling about pontificating and commiserating and any other beautiful word in English about just feeling absolutely miserable about something, and it could be something as terrible as a disease or something more you know more structural. And ultimately it's about doing something. So you'd ask me what I'm going to do. I don't know yet because it's really fresh in my mind. But what the experience of Avichai had taught me is really like there's not a moment too soon to actually start something. He had launched a nonprofit that was very proud to be part of for many years, that figured out a very innovative way of offering prizes to research team if they come up for answers for milestones in ALS research. Had raised more than $10 million over the years, had handed out millions of dollars of prizes. And this was just by sheer entrepreneurship and ingenuity of his in figuring out what could make a difference. So the question of what could actually make a difference and doing something about it rather than talking about it is fundamental. And you talked about it in the context of parenthood. Before my kids were born, I did think about the two things that I would want them to possess. And actually, it was not the ability to program or having 5 languages. It was resilience and optimism. And if I try to distill this guy's journey, it was really a lot about these two elements. It's the notion that things are going to be better tomorrow than they are today, or they have the potential, at least, of being better tomorrow than they are today. By the way, basic tenet of entrepreneurship, if we go back to earlier
Exactly.
discussion, and the resilience. Things may not be as good today as you hope them to be, but you got to find the resources, the mental, the emotional resources, the cognitive resources to deal with them. So, if these are two traits that I manage to demonstrate or provide example for my anyone around me, my girls, but anyone that works with me, then I've done something right.
That's beautiful. I'm listening to you. I wasn't talking. I was listening to
Yeah.
you.
You're doing
And
the 98% of trying to pounce.
no, if I'll have time later, I say something about it. But wait, you described your friend and what he's dealing with, and all I could think about was the frustration and the helplessness that sometimes you feel when things like that happen to you, and we cannot control the destiny. We don't know what the other day brings. And sometimes we have to, just address situation of life, a disease, loss of someone, something difficult that happens. And we're standing in front of it, and, this is the situation. We cannot change it. We cannot undo it. And then it's really, this this resilience, this bouncing back to the center, to the question of, okay, I cannot change the situation. What I can do proactively in order to impact the way it goes, or my feeling towards it, or how can I do something to change a little bit, or to support it in some way. And I really see a lot of similarity between, addressing those kind of situations, difficult situations in life, and entrepreneurship, because this resilience and this optimism that you just spoke about, and this understanding that all we have to do is do something. I don't know where it's going to lead me. I don't know if it's exactly the right direction. Yes, let's take it back to the questions that you want to see with the founders that you're about to invest in. Let's see how he thinks. Let's see where he's heading to. Let's see how deep he checks, the research, the questions, the assumptions, etc. But let's help him or her to embrace this mindset of, okay, I cannot change the situation. I can do many things in order to change later on some of the results, or to improve the better, quality of my life, or to even improve,
Right.
the quality of the life of those who are dear to me, and what can I do with them along this process. And this resilience and optimism is so crucial. I totally agree with you. And, I have this a bit of a naive thought about it. It's interesting for me to see what you think about it. Can we? I do believe that the answer is yes, but still,
Hmm.
can we?
Then yes.
Can we have embrace this mindset? Can we have this perspective, even if we don't face something really difficult or a very big challenge or something that happens in life? Do we have to wait as individuals, as people? Do we have to wait to this difficult life event that will happen to us in order to embrace this mindset? Or how can we change things and do small things in order to embrace this resilience and optimism, as do the best thing that we do in every step of the way? And if something like that will happen, we will be much stronger in the way that we deal with it.
Well, so honestly, I think I have a lot to go. So I don't think I can preach anyone on how I really work at it.
Yeah.
Especially actually not the resilience. I'm pretty good. I think at the resilience side, but the optimism is definitely something
You have some cynical aspects as well.
I have
Yeah,
to
we know it.
which again I don't think it's separate
It's a
from being
spectrum.
optimistic, but
It's a
it's okay.
spectrum.
But then I wouldn't say yes. I would say a resounding no to your question. I don't think you have to wait for the big one. Like they're waiting for in California for the big one, the big earthquake to come.
No, my yes is your no. We say the same,
Yeah,
just from a
yeah,
different angle.
yeah. I'm like there's, I mean, first of all, what's pain is subjective,
Hmm.
and someone's pain is nothing to another. So I don't even want to go
Yeah.
to the philosophical
Yeah.
conversation of what's harsh.
Yes.
But I will say, if we're facing this every single day, every single moment, we're raising a fund. It will take longer than we would have hoped because of the cycle. Every day, you face the position of people or institutions that are going to say no to us, or to our entrepreneurs, and the list goes on. How are you dealing with this? And I think, when I hear you speak, it's a little bit, it throws me to a different vector, which I didn't think about, in the entrepreneurial journey. Yes, we do want our entrepreneurs to analyze and think. But at the same time, if I get what I'm saying, is that I actually want them to do stuff. And I think where you see entrepreneurs maybe probably having a little bit of a skew is towards doing a little bit more, because that's the nature of entrepreneur. You got to do, but there's also something super healthy about doing stuff. And you just want people to do stuff in the context of where it makes sense, and not run, amok to one direction, go back, another direction, go back. I think sometimes, especially for first time entrepreneurs, the opportunity cost gets lost on them a little bit. And the opportunity cost is not just the money that is being wasted, which reduces your runway.
It's the time and the energy.
It's the time, and it's the energy, and it's your credibility within your own team.
Hmm.
When you run, and then the other day or the next day you come in and you say, you know what, that's absolutely not our product market fit. It's going to be something completely different. Well, again, I go back to the underlying assumption. If you've got some sort of a tick the box kind of, here's the stuff that we are, that's what we were about as a startup. And guess what? Number three had changed. And it's no longer three, it's 3A or 3B or 3D or 3Z. It doesn't matter if you went through dozens of iteration, but at least you're consistent with the iteration. And then the action that you take is not an action that is just to do something.
Do it mindfully.
Mindfully, exactly.
Because then you integrate the being into the doing, and you're just, this is the difference between productivity, efficiency, and being effective. Okay, and entrepreneurs, especially in the beginning, they like to think they need to be very productive, but no, they need to be effective, because
And
if they will be just productive, it doesn't necessarily mean that they are going to the right
right.
direction, right?
And I think if there's anyone who's going to find this conversation comical, is actually my partner Deka, because if there's one thing he would be, I'm sure, assured that I did take from him is really the doing a little bit less, because I am
Mhm.
that entrepreneur running around.
Uh-huh.
So like, and there's something about
It's not comical. He will feel. He
I
will
feel,
feel. That you give him compliments.
the guy
You
is a
took something.
the guy is a surfer by soul, who's become also like every sunrise surfer in the last year or so. And there's something that he said again. I think he's going to be shocked that it kind of stuck that way. But he's saying like sometimes when you surf, you kind of have to ride it. If
Right.
the big wave comes, you just wait it out, and then you do. And if you take the action at the wrong time, you spend just so much energy
Mhm.
on something that's going to get you absolutely nowhere. And there's something about the timing of it, the direction of it, the vector of it, how you actually do it. Again, something I need to apply to my own life all the time.
I want to make this beautiful connection. Do you remember that in the beginning of the episode, we took a breath and we inhaled for 4, we paused for 4, and we exhaled for 4. And this pause
This
in
was a
the
couple of years ago, I think.
just an hour ago, and this pause between the inhale and exhale is a beautiful way to practice exactly this. Sometimes we need to surf. Sometimes we just need to let the things be. We're so control freaks. We're trying to hold everything together so uptight. And sometimes we need to learn how to let go. Now, letting go doesn't mean that we don't care, doesn't mean that we are not responsible, doesn't mean that we don't think about things. We understand that sometimes things have their own pace, their own rhythm, and we need to learn how to dance with it in a while, for a while, not for always, and to get back to them tomorrow.
And if I try to translate that to the world of an entrepreneur, because what you're saying is so true in theory, but I
It's
think
very practical.
so many of our CEOs may be listening to this and saying like, this is just abstract, like there's just no way I can hold, because any day, to the opportunity cost that we spoke about, any day that gets lost, it's a huge day in the life of a startup. But I think maybe the way to think about it, or the way I try to think about it, is really more of a prioritization exercise than
Definitely.
anything else, or like the maximum exercise. If you would apply an algorithm, what is of the 10 things that you got on
The
your
one
plate,
that will move the needle.
what will move the needle?
And also another thing that is very practical. Sometimes we're struggling as founders with so many, decision makings that we need to do, considerations, or the feature, too many bugs, or things that we don't know how to solve in the same moment. And it's already late at night. And the productivity part of us will said, okay, let's continue, let's try harder, let's work, let's stay for more hours. And the effective part of us needs to say, okay, let's go to sleep. Let's have a good night's sleep. Let's leave it for the night. Let's wake up tomorrow with fresh eyes, fresh mind, and look at this. And many times, a new angle will arise, and we'll look at it from a different way. And I know about myself that it really happens a lot, and I train myself how to do it. And then, the answer just rise.
Yeah,
So it's very practical in that manner.
and I feel like we can go on for hours, but there's something about how you really go through these exercises with entrepreneurs in teams, which sometimes it is the tactical things that do make a difference. For example, in just the way you even frame things or phrase things to yourself.
Definitely.
I think, if I look at, I don't know how many hundreds or thousands now of conversations I've had with entrepreneurs, if I would ask someone what could go wrong, what's the worst case scenario, I will 100% of the time will get an answer which is less thoughtful Then if, for example, I would ask if someone were here and would have to give all the negative points about what's not going to work out,
Mm-hmm.
and even just detaching someone
Mm-hmm.
from the situation and have them respond as if someone in that is not associated with the startup rather than themselves, you're going to get much more thoughtful answers about this. So I think as an entrepreneur, it's always considering how you actually frame this to yourself and to your team,
Mm-hmm.
and have a conversation with your team where you're saying, if someone came in and looked at this outside in, what's the failure points that they would
Mm-hmm.
see, rather than saying, what are our failure points?
Mm-hmm.
It just always you're going to get a different kind of level of
And that's why
answers.
it's so important from time to time to have an external eye that helps you to see your blindness, the blind spots that you cannot see because you're so focused on the ongoing, on the day to day. And I like to use this metaphor of, the child that sits on the moon in the Warner Brothers, right? In the
Yeah.
sorry,
DreamWorks.
DreamWorks.
Yeah.
Sorry, yeah. And he stands, the fishing, and he tries to catch something. And I like to tell the founders sometimes sit on the moon, go to 30,000, feet, look from a far point, look from an external point, and ask yourself, what do you catch from there? Because when we're in it, sometimes we are mixed up with everything, and we cannot look at things from a higher perspective that helps us get this framing and get this, prioritization of what we need to do. We have so many more things to address, but it's already, it's getting to an hour, and I don't want to for them
It's
to
going to be
listen
the
for too
3 hour.
long.
Yes.
Yeah, I
Damn.
really can
Yes.
continue for this part.
They've
two
got
and
a
three.
life. Your
Yeah,
listeners got a
but
life.
we have to do something because we spoke about it before, and you're a little bit cynical, etc. So I do want to ask you, how do you use humor, sense of humor, and humor as a tool, very practical tool, also to help reduce the anxiety and to make things, a little bit more smoothly, and to create a different atmosphere without other thinking that, it's not serious enough, it's not in the right space, etc., etc.
Well, I don't know that there's a method to it. I can assure you, if there's one asymmetry in my life, is how funny I think I am versus what others think of me. And I'm not just
But
saying it.
at least you're acknowledging it.
I'm absolutely acknowledging. We talked about it. We should have as few of blind spots as possible. But I think there's absolutely no guidebook to
Uh-huh.
using humor. And again, I would be,
Just use it.
my wife would say I would be a terrible example of how to do that. But I will say I find it extremely compelling when working with people, entrepreneurs, partners, what have you, who have that sense of how you can look at the situation and find what is funny about it and what is comical about it. For me, that's, sometimes it is we talked about like the emotional affinity. For someone, I mean, I don't need a parade of clowns coming to see me every day, but there's something about the ability to recognize it. And I think part of it is also, in a way, just being self-reflective,
Uh-huh.
because I think these two go
Uh-huh.
hand in hand. So being able to be self-reflective and again, not overly modest, but actually seeing the I mean, life is
The
funny,
faults
life
and,
is sad and
but
funny and
yes.
everything else, but absolutely seeing it and recognizing it and not being afraid of it, because the
Exactly,
point is not how you stack up in the level of seriousness. I mean, people have done fantastic things, and they can also be a little bit clownish. It's fine. So if someone were to tell me an amazing practical joke that they pulled, I would. That's a very very that's something I respect. Again, using this word.
It also makes things very real. Real. It touches, it touches the stomach. It's real. I do want to mention on this note that there's a difference, a very big difference between having a humor and being a little bit more, easygoing in the way that we see things and having more perspective, and being cynical. And cynicism is something that
The lowest form of wit.
I don't like cynicism. I don't understand
You called me a
cynicism.
cynicist earlier.
But yeah, because you have it a bit in you, and maybe it's something you need to work on. And I want to mention that many people do not understand cynicism, and they can be vulnerable about it and be take it, personally. And sometimes we don't know it. And if we are like that, I'm not saying that you are. Other people in other
Yes.
podcast room, in other studio, they are not necessarily aware of how it impacts their team.
Because
their
I'm
perfor-
like this, I did not pick up on your point with the other room. But no, really and honestly, I think cynicism has little room in professional interactions. I mean, because it's so many times a disguise to actually
Ex-
offering direct feedback,
exactly.
which many times people are reluctant to give. And
Mhm.
I see so many entrepreneurs where we say no to, and they say, and we try as many times as possible, not always, but to actually offer feedback on why not. And it's remarkable how it's easy to just not offer that feedback. And I even friend who's a very accomplished investor that I like, and he said to me once, there's absolutely no upside from offering this kind of feedback. And I absolutely disagree with that notion. There's something about being also very straightforward about what doesn't work
Mhm.
with folks you haven't worked with, or even, and definitely with folks that you are already working with, that makes it a very big difference. And I try to, again, even if you will call me a cynic, to not use this very crude tool of cynicism to actually offer feedback, but rather be very clear and direct about the feedback that I'm offering.
And I want to add on top of it that sometimes using cynicism as because it's a defense. It's our way to defend ourselves. It covers other things, very important things that can come out. And last week I had this session with founders I love, and they're serial entrepreneurs, and it's their third startup, and they're now fundraising their A round. And the CEO wanted to share what he shared later on about the anxiety that he feels currently because they're having difficulties to raise the money. And they're good and the product is good, but the market is hard. And at the beginning, the atmosphere was so cynical that he could not put it on the table. He could not
The
open up
atmosphere
and
at the
in
startup,
the room, yeah,
in
because they were cynical about it. And when I stopped it and we opened, this window to really bring out how do we feel, so something beautiful happened. They all got off their suit of cynicism. The CEO shared his anxiety about what's going on, and amid 1 second afterwards, his two co-founders shared exactly their anxieties about what's going on. Each one, takes it from a different perspective. It
yeah,
affects other things, but the fact that we took the cynicism out of the table allowed them to really bring themselves into the conversation to share how they feel, how they're going to address it, how can they support each other. And they told me afterwards, it's not that I'm amazing, they did an amazing job, and they said it was really so impactful for us. And we just, it was difficult for us to put the cynicism aside, but it made such a difference in the conversation and in the way that later on they could support each other to continue.
yeah,
So
I totally get it.
great, Guy. So we said hi, Guy, and now we're going to say bye, Guy, right?
I just want to
Soon.
hear
Yeah, yeah.
one more word in British English.
And
That's
British English? Oh, really?
uh,
Oh, really?
goodbye. Goodbye.
Goodbye. So,
Toodaloo.
to do. We spoke about so many things today, and I like it just that we go with the flow and whatever comes in, and this is the way it should be
Yeah,
now,
that's,
because
such is life.
all we need to do is just do, right, and to navigate it with
Right.
a wave, with a river, with whatever comes. And as long as there are good people on board, so good things will come, both for founders, for investors, and also for us. So I want to really thank you for
Thank you
coming
for having
here
me.
today and for this lovely conversation.
Thank you.
And hi to Dekel, who couldn't join us, but maybe we'll continue it in
Hey,
some.
hey, no cynicism.
No, I was totally honest. I was totally honest about that guy. Founders that wants to address you and TPY, where can they find you?
Well, TPY Capital. There's the email, and whoever wants to find us can find us.
That was very American, the capital, And we didn't discuss McKinsey, and we didn't discuss Harvard, but it doesn't matter because
Really,
we
yeah.
discussed life, and
That's
what's
true.
going on now. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thanks again.
To our lovely listeners, we're going to hit pause until the next episode. That's also something I say to the entrepreneurs in my clinic in between sessions. If you enjoyed listening, I would really appreciate it if you share the podcast with people who you think would derive value from it. Thanks to the amazing studios at Google Campus that allow me to record all this content in here. Feel free to visit my website at galiblochliran.com and leave your details there if you wish to be updated and learn more about the mental aspects of the entrepreneurial journey, Also, be sure to follow my podcast, The Human Founder, in any of your podcast apps. Let's hit pause. Till next time. Bye,
Bye bye.
guy.